My name is Rebecca Wilson, and at 38, I stood at my mother's funeral, a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I knew she was coming. My sister, Stephanie. It had been 6 agonizing years since she ripped my life apart, 6 years since she stole Nathan, my millionaire fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry. 6 years since I'd seen either of them. And then, there they were. She walked in, flashing that massive diamond ring, that same smug smile plastered across her face. But you know what? A strange, quiet calm washed over me. Because Stephanie had no idea who was waiting for her. Mom, Eleanor, she was the bedrock of our family. Growing up in our modest suburban home outside Boston, she taught me everything about strength, about dignity. Our bond, it just grew deeper with every passing year. Even after I moved downtown, built my career as a marketing executive, I called her almost daily. She was my confidant, my best advisor, my biggest cheerleader. So, when she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 8 months ago, my world just shattered. Even with aggressive treatments, we knew time was slipping away. But Mom, she faced it all with such incredible grace. She worried more about us than her own pain. Her final weeks were so peaceful, surrounded by everyone she loved, right there in the home where she'd raised us. She slipped away holding my hand, her last wish for me to find peace. 6 years earlier, when I was 32, my life looked perfect on paper. I had the career, the friends, the great apartment. But I felt incomplete. I was working 60-hour weeks, dating occasionally, but nothing serious ever clicked. Then, at a charity gala, my college friend Allison introduced me to Nathan Reynolds. Nathan was electric. Charismatic, perfect teeth, a confidence that just filled the room. A self-made tech millionaire at 36, the kind of success story you saw in magazines. We connected instantly. We shared a love for art, for travel, for ambitious dreams. After our first date, at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor, I called my mom. "I've met someone special," I told her. Our relationship took off like a rocket. Weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, opera boxes at the symphony, intimate dinners. Nathan was so attentive, so generous. He always brought thoughtful gifts, planned these elaborate dates. After 18 months, during a private dinner on a yacht in Boston Harbor, Nathan proposed. A 5-carat diamond ring. I said yes, without a second's hesitation. My parents were ecstatic, especially Mom, who immediately started envisioning the perfect wedding. Nathan had the resources to make any dream come true, and Mom insisted we shouldn't hold back. And then there was Stephanie, my younger sister, only 2 years my junior. Our relationship, it was complicated. As kids, we were close, but there was always this undercurrent of competition. Stephanie always wanted what I had. My toys, my friends, my parents' attention. If I achieved something, she had to match it or somehow one-up me. Mom always tried to keep the peace, making sure we both felt loved and seen. Despite all that history, I chose Stephanie to be my maid of honor. Mom said it would bring us closer, and I desperately wanted to believe that, as adults, we had moved past those childish jealousies. When I introduced Stephanie to Nathan at a family dinner, she just fawned over him, complimented him excessively. I noticed her touching his arm, laughing a little too hard at his jokes. But I dismissed it. That's just Stephanie being charming, I told myself. She's happy for me. Our engagement party was at my parents' colonial-style home. Stephanie helped Mom with the decorations, hanging fairy lights, arranging flowers. But throughout the evening, I'd catch her watching Nathan across the room. Whenever our eyes met, she'd quickly flash a smile and raise her glass in my direction. Later that night, as guests were leaving, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Rebecca, dear," she said, carefully arranging leftover appetizers. "I noticed Stephanie seems quite taken with Nathan." "She's just being friendly, Mom," I replied, washing champagne flutes. "Besides, she's dating Brian, the pharmaceutical rep." Mom nodded, but she wasn't convinced. "Just be careful, honey. You know how your sister can get when you have something she admires." I kissed her cheek, tried to reassure her. "We're adults now, Mom." Stephanie's happy for me. I'm sure of it. How wrong I was. How painfully, devastatingly wrong. 3 months before our wedding, I started noticing it. Subtle changes in Nathan. He began working later, often answering texts at odd hours with the excuse of international clients. Our usual Friday date nights were frequently rescheduled because of emergency meetings. When we were together, he seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone, offering only half-hearted attention to our conversations. More concerning, he started criticizing things he once loved about me. My laugh was suddenly too loud in public. My favorite blue dress, the one he used to adore, now made me look washed out. Even my habit of reading before bed, which he'd once found endearing, became annoying because the light kept him awake. Meanwhile, Stephanie started calling more frequently, always with questions about wedding details. "I just want everything to be perfect for my big sister," she'd say. Mom was handling most of the planning, but Stephanie volunteered to help with vendor meetings I couldn't attend due to work. One Thursday evening, Nathan and I had dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant. He barely made eye contact, responding to my stories about work with one-word answers. When his phone buzzed for the 5th time, I reached my limit. "Is there something more important happening elsewhere?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light despite the growing irritation simmering inside me. "Sorry, just work stuff," he muttered, putting his phone face down. You know how it is before a product launch. Later that week, doing laundry, I noticed an unfamiliar perfume on Nathan's collar. It was floral and heavy, nothing like my subtle scent. When I confronted him, Nathan explained he'd been in meetings all day with a potential investor, Rebecca Mills, who apparently wore overpowering perfume and had hugged him goodbye. The explanation, it seemed plausible, and I wanted to believe him. I called my friend Allison, expressing my concerns over coffee the next morning. "Every relationship gets jittery before the wedding," Allison reassured me, stirring her latte. "Parker and I fought constantly the month before, and now we've been married 5 years. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't dissolve." Mom noticed my anxiety during our weekly lunch. "You seem distracted, sweetheart," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "Wedding stress? Or something else?" I forced a smile. "Just busy with the final arrangements. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. I started making more effort, thinking maybe I'd been taking Nathan for granted. I booked a spa day, bought new lingerie, tried cooking his favorite meals. The more I tried, the more distant he became. Then came the cake tasting appointment. Nathan had been looking forward to it for weeks. That morning, he called, claiming an unexpected meeting. "Stephanie can go with you," he suggested. "She knows my preferences anyway." When I hung up, I felt sick. How did my sister know my fiancé's cake preferences better than I did? Still, I accepted her offer to join me. The next day, cleaning Nathan's car before a dinner party, I found an earring wedged between the passenger seat and center console. A dangling silver earring with a tiny sapphire. My heart dropped. I immediately recognized it as Stephanie's. My sister had worn those exact earrings to my engagement party, a gift from our grandmother. When I showed Nathan the earring that evening, his face remained perfectly composed. "Oh, your sister must have dropped it when I gave her a ride to the florist last week," he said smoothly. "She mentioned losing an earring." "You never told me you drove Stephanie to the florist," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't I? It must have slipped my mind. It wasn't important." When I called Stephanie, her explanation matched his perfectly. Too perfectly. Oh, thank goodness. I've been looking everywhere for that earring. Nathan was kind enough to drive me since my car was in the shop. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts raced. Had they rehearsed their story? Was I being paranoid? My weight started dropping from the stress. Dark circles formed under my eyes. I started seeing a therapist, not even telling Nathan. 3 weeks before the wedding, Nathan suggested we postpone. "I'm worried about you, Rebecca. You're not yourself lately. Maybe we're rushing things." I broke down, begging him to tell me what was wrong, what I had done, how I could fix it. He held me, assuring me everything was fine, but his eyes were vacant. That night, I woke at 3 a.m. to find Nathan's side of the bed empty. From the hallway, I heard his hushed voice from the guest bedroom.
Not now.
She'll hear us.
I know.
I know. Soon, I promise. My blood ran cold. The next day, I decided to surprise Nathan at his office with lunch. My father, Thomas, called as I was leaving my apartment. Rebecca, are you eating properly? Your mother says you've lost too much weight. We're concerned. I'm fine, Dad. Just pre-wedding jitters. I'm actually bringing Nathan lunch right now.
Good.
That boy better be treating my daughter like a queen. If only he knew. The security guard at Nathan's building recognized me and waved me through with a smile. On the elevator ride up, I checked my reflection, trying to smooth the worry lines between my eyebrows. The lunch bag in my hand held Nathan's favorite sandwich from the deli across from my office. When I reached the reception area, Nathan's secretary, Margot, looked up from her computer, her eyes widening. Rebecca? We weren't expecting you today. Her gaze darted to Nathan's closed office door, then back to me. Nathan is in a meeting right now. That's okay, I said, lifting the lunch bag. I just brought him lunch. I can wait. Margot stood quickly, blocking my path. Actually, he specifically asked not to be disturbed. Perhaps I could let him know you're here? Something in her nervous manner, her hesitation, triggered every suspicion I had. Is he alone in there, Margot? Her hesitation told me everything. Before she could respond, I walked past her, my heart hammering against my ribs, and pushed open Nathan's office door. The scene, it burned into my memory forever. Nathan leaning against his desk, his hands on my sister's waist, her arms wrapped around his neck, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. Neither of them noticed me at first, giving me several excruciating seconds to absorb every detail. Stephanie's skirt pushed up. Nathan's tie loosened. The familiarity in their embrace that spoke of countless similar moments. When the door clicked shut behind me, they sprang apart. 3 faces frozen in a tableau of shock. Rebecca. Nathan recovered first, straightening his tie. This isn't what it looks like. Stephanie didn't even try such a transparent lie. Instead, she lifted her chin defiantly.
We didn't plan this.
It just happened. The calm that washed over me was horrifying. How long? Nathan glanced at Stephanie, then back at me. Rebecca, let's discuss this privately. How long? My voice remained steady, a dangerous edge to it. For months, Stephanie answered. Since the engagement party. For months. Nearly half our engagement. While I'd been selecting wedding invitations, choosing floral arrangements, they had been betraying me. Nathan moved behind his desk, distancing himself physically, as if preparing for a business negotiation. I didn't mean for this to happen, Rebecca. Sometimes feelings change. I was going to tell you after. After what? After the wedding? After our honeymoon? I was trying to find the right time. His voice had that practiced smoothness he used for difficult client meetings. The lunch bag dropped from my hand, forgotten. I trusted you. Both of you. Stephanie, at least, had the decency to look uncomfortable. It just happened, Becca. We tried to fight it. Don't call me Becca. The childhood nickname felt like another violation. Nothing just happens for 4 months. You made choices. Every secret call, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye, knowing what you were doing. Nathan pressed the intercom button. Margot, please come in. Moments later, Margot appeared, pointedly avoiding my gaze. Please escort Rebecca out. She's upset. I'm escorting myself out, I said, my dignity somehow intact despite feeling utterly shattered inside. You deserve each other. In the elevator, the tears finally came. By the time I reached my car, I was struggling to breathe between sobs. The drive home is a blur. I only remember calling my mother from my apartment, curled on the bathroom floor, unable to form coherent sentences through my crying. Mom and Dad arrived within the hour, using their emergency key when I couldn't bring myself to open the door. Mom held me while I told them everything. Dad paced the living room, his face growing redder with each detail. I'll kill him, he muttered, hand over his heart. Both of them. Thomas, your blood pressure. Mom warned, though her own face showed equal fury. The next days passed in a haze of pain. Mom helped me call vendors to cancel wedding arrangements while Dad handled the financial aspects. When I returned the engagement ring to Nathan's apartment, leaving it with the doorman, I couldn't bear to see him. I found Stephanie had already moved her things in. Most of her clothes were there, family photos arranged on shelves that once held mine. Nathan's email about dividing our shared assets was coldly efficient, mentioning that Stephanie had helped him catalog my remaining belongings. The betrayal ran deeper than I initially realized. Through mutual friends, I learned they had been meeting secretly whenever I worked late or traveled for business. Stephanie had pursued him deliberately, finding excuses to see him alone, sending texts and photos when I wasn't around. The scandal spread quickly through our social circle. Some friends sided with me, others with Nathan, citing his influence in the business community. Several admitted they'd noticed flirtation between Nathan and Stephanie but hadn't wanted to get involved. Their cowardice stung almost as much as the betrayal. Mom became my lifeline during those dark months. She brought food when I couldn't eat, listened to my tearful rants, and stayed overnight when the loneliness became unbearable. She tried repeatedly to mediate between Stephanie and me, inviting us both to family dinners that inevitably ended in tense silence or bitter arguments. During one such dinner, Stephanie snapped after I refused to pass her the salt. "You always got everything first, Rebecca. The grades, the job, the apartment. For once, I got something before you did." "My fiancé wasn't a prize to be won," I replied, my voice shaking. "He was the man I loved and trusted." Mom put her fork down. "Stephanie Marie Thompson, apologize to your sister right now." "For what?" "Being honest? Nathan chose me. He loves me now." I stood, napkin thrown onto my plate. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. I'm sorry." It was the last family dinner I attended with Stephanie present. Dad's heart problems worsened from the stress of his daughter's feud, requiring medication adjustments and additional doctor visits. Mom aged years and months, the lines around her eyes deepening as she tried desperately to hold her family together. 6 months after discovering Nathan and Stephanie's betrayal, I hit rock bottom. My therapist diagnosed me with depression and recommended medication. Work suffered as I struggled to focus, eventually losing a major client after a disastrous presentation where I broke down crying. My boss suggested a leave of absence, but I knew staying in Boston, where memories lurked around every corner, would only prolong my suffering. When a marketing director position opened in our Chicago branch, I applied immediately. The interview went surprisingly well, my desperation for change perhaps reading as enthusiasm. 2 weeks later, I received the offer. Mom helped me pack my apartment, carefully wrapping photos and mementos in tissue paper. As we sorted through my belongings, deciding what to keep and what to donate, she broached the subject that hung between us. "Will you ever consider forgiving Stephanie?" she asked, sealing a box with packing tape. I continued folding sweaters without looking up. "I don't know, Mom."
Not now.
"Maybe not ever." "Forgiveness isn't about them deserving it," she said softly. "It's about freeing yourself." "I am freeing myself. I'm moving to Chicago." Mom sat beside me on the bed, taking my hands in hers. "Running away isn't the same as healing, sweetheart." Tears filled my eyes. "I need space to even begin to heal."
Can you understand that?
She nodded, pulling me into a tight hug. "Promise you'll call. Promise you won't shut us out completely." "I promise." Saying goodbye to my parents was harder than I anticipated. Dad held me longer than usual, his voice gruff with emotion. "You show them, kiddo. Build a life so good they'll choke on their regret." My first weeks in Chicago were lonely, doubt-filled. My studio apartment felt sterile, unfamiliar. I worked long hours to avoid going home to empty rooms, eating takeout at my desk, falling into bed exhausted each night. Then came the news that twisted the knife deeper. Mom called one Sunday morning, her voice cautious. "Rebecca, I feel you should hear this from me rather than social media. Stephanie and Nathan got married yesterday." The small civil ceremony had been featured in Boston Magazine's society pages, Nathan's business connections ensuring coverage despite the modest scale. The accompanying photo showed them beaming outside the courthouse, Stephanie wearing a simple white dress, my former engagement ring prominently displayed on her finger. That night was my lowest point. I drank an entire bottle of wine alone, scrolled through old photos of Nathan and me, and cried until my eyes swelled shut. I called in sick to work the next day, unable to face the world. But something shifted during those dark hours alone. As morning light filtered through my blinds, I made a decision. This would be the last day I gave them power over my happiness. I deleted all photos of Nathan from my phone, blocked both him and Stephanie on social media, and took a long shower, imagining my pain washing away down the drain. At work, I threw myself into projects with renewed focus. My boss noticed the change, assigning me to more significant clients. I developed a reputation for creativity and dedication, earning respect in my new office. My first real Chicago friend was Madison Reynolds, our HR director, who invited me to join her book club. Through her, I met other women, slowly building a social circle. Madison frequently tried to set me up on dates, but I declined each offer. The thought of romantic vulnerability still terrified me. 4 months into my Chicago life, I was sent to a technology conference in San Francisco to represent our company. On the second evening, I attended a business dinner with potential clients, seated next to Zachary Foster, a tech investor and entrepreneur who had recently relocated from Seattle. Zachary was different from Nathan in every single way. Where Nathan had been flashy and charming, Zachary was understated and genuine. His quiet confidence and thoughtful questions drew people in without demanding attention. When he spoke about his work, his passion was evident, but never boastful. He asked for my card after dinner, and I gave it without expectation. To my surprise, he emailed the next morning, asking if I'd like to continue our conversation about digital marketing trends over coffee before the day's sessions. Over the next 3 months, Zachary and I maintained professional contact. He referred clients to my agency, and I introduced him to my Chicago business connections. Madison noticed our frequent work lunches and raised an eyebrow. "He likes you, Rebecca. And not just professionally. We're just colleagues," I insisted. "Colleagues don't look at each other the way he looks at you." Eventually, Zachary asked me to dinner at a restaurant unrelated to work. I panicked, almost canceling twice before forcing myself to go. 20 minutes into the date, discussing our favorite books, I had a full-blown panic attack. My hands shook, breathing became difficult, and tears welled in my eyes. Instead of being embarrassed or annoyed, Zachary moved to sit beside me, speaking calmly until my breathing normalized. He drove me home without pressure or questions. The next day, flowers arrived at my office with a note. "No pressure, no expectations. Just hoping you're feeling better, Zachary." That evening, I called him and shared everything about Nathan and Stephanie. He listened without interruption, then shared his own story of heartbreak from his past. His marriage ended when his wife left him for his business partner, taking half their joint company in the divorce. "Broken trust leaves scars," he said. "Anyone worth your time will understand that healing isn't linear." Over the following months, we built a foundation of friendship first. Zachary never pushed for more than I could give, respecting my boundaries while remaining steadfastly present. For our 5th date, he cooked dinner at his apartment instead of taking me to a crowded restaurant that might trigger my anxiety. When panic occasionally resurfaced, he knew exactly how to help me through it. For the first time since Nathan, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, trust was possible again. 1 year after moving to Chicago, I barely recognized my life. My promotion to senior marketing director came with a corner office overlooking the river. My circle of friends had expanded beyond Madison to include several close confidants. And most surprisingly, I had fallen deeply in love with Zachary. Unlike Nathan's flashy courtship, Zachary's love manifested in consistent, thoughtful ways. He remembered small details like how I preferred oat milk in my coffee or which true crime podcasts I followed. He respected my independence while offering unwavering support. Most importantly, he never compared me to anyone else or tried to change me. I met Zachary's sister, Caroline, during her visit from Portland. We connected immediately, exchanging numbers and developing our own friendship independent of Zachary. She told me stories of their childhood in Seattle, painting a picture of the boy who became the man I was growing to love. My relationship with my parents continued from a distance. I called Mom weekly, carefully steering conversations away from Stephanie. Dad occasionally joined these calls, his gruff voice softening when telling me how proud he was of my fresh start. I visited twice that year, timing my trips when I knew Stephanie and Nathan would be away. Mom provided occasional updates about them. Their marriage appeared perfect on social media, Stephanie posting photos of luxury vacations and charity galas. According to Mom, they had purchased a large house in Beacon Hill and were renovating extensively. Stephanie asks about you sometimes, Mom mentioned during one call. What do you tell her? I asked, stirring pasta sauce on my stove. That you're doing well, that you're building a new life. Does she ever express regret? Mom sighed in her way. She gets quiet when your name comes up. My therapy continued in Chicago, my new therapist helping me process the betrayal and build healthier relationship patterns. I learned to recognize my triggers and communicate boundaries effectively. Slowly, the nightmares about Nathan and Stephanie faded. In June, Zachary surprised me with a weekend trip to Michigan's wine country. We stayed at a charming bed and breakfast surrounded by vineyards, spent afternoons wine tasting, and evenings watching the sunset over Lake Michigan. For the first time in years, I felt completely present and happy, without the shadow of past betrayal hanging over me. On our last evening, walking through a garden filled with early summer blooms at the Chicago Botanic Garden, Zachary stopped beneath a trellis covered in climbing roses. "Rebecca," he said, taking both my hands in his. "This past year, knowing you has been the greatest gift of my life." When he knelt, producing a ring box from his pocket, panic flashed briefly. Images of Nathan's proposal threatened to overshadow this moment. But looking into Zachary's eyes, I saw only sincerity and love. "I'm not asking for an answer today," he said, seeming to read my hesitation. "I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or next year, I'll be here." Tears filled my eyes, but not from fear or pain. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready now." The ring was nothing like the ostentatious diamond Nathan had given me. A simple emerald with small diamonds on either side. Elegant and understated, like our relationship. That night, I called my parents with the news. Mom cried happy tears. "He sounds wonderful, darling. When can we meet him?" "Soon," I promised. "Very soon." We planned a small wedding, only 30 guests, at a historic Chicago venue. At Mom's urging, I sent Stephanie an invitation, more as a gesture toward healing than an expectation of attendance. Her response came via email, brief and cold. "Congratulations on your engagement. Unfortunately, Nathan and I have prior commitments on that date. Best wishes for your future." Mom was disappointed, but unsurprised. "Give her time, Rebecca. This is progress compared to where you both were." Our wedding day arrived, intimate and joyful with my parents, new friends, and Zachary's family in attendance. Dad walked me down the aisle, whispering, "I haven't seen you this happy in years, kiddo." Zachary's vows acknowledged our journey. "Rebecca, I promise to remember that love is both strong and fragile, requiring care and commitment every day. I promise to be worthy of the trust you've given me, knowing how precious and hard-won that gift is." We built our life together in Chicago, buying a brownstone that we renovated together. My career continued advancing, eventually leading to a vice president position. Zachary's investment firm grew, focusing on supporting women-led tech startups. During a dinner with business associates, I learned something that connected my past to my present. A venture capitalist mentioned working with Nathan years earlier. "Reynolds?" "Yeah, he and Foster had quite the rivalry in the angel investing space about 7 years back. Foster backed the right startup. Reynolds backed the competitor. Foster's pick got acquired for millions. Reynolds went bankrupt." Later that night, I asked Zachary about this connection. "I was going to tell you eventually," he admitted. "I knew who you were when we met at that conference. Not the details of what happened, but that you had been engaged to Reynolds. Why didn't you say anything? I wanted you to know me for me, not as someone connected to your past. I wasn't angry.
Somehow, the cosmic symmetry felt right.
2 years into our marriage, we began trying for a baby. Months passed without success, leading to fertility specialists and difficult conversations. Through disappointments and medical procedures, Zachary remained my rock, holding me through tears and reminding me that family comes in many forms. Then came the devastating call about Mom's cancer diagnosis. Zachary and I flew to Boston immediately, meeting with oncologists and helping my parents navigate treatment options. Mom put on a brave face, but the cancer was aggressive and had already spread. I took a leave from work to care for her, moving temporarily back to my childhood home. Zachary flew in every weekend, supporting both me and my increasingly frail father. In her final weeks, Mom and I had precious conversations about life, love, and family. One evening, as I adjusted her pillows, she broached the subject of Stephanie. I wish you girls could find peace with each other, she said, her voice weak but determined. Life is too short for such distance between sisters. I know, Mom, I replied, swallowing back tears. Promise me you'll try, Rebecca. Not for her, but for yourself. And maybe a little bit for your old mother. I promised, not knowing if I could keep it, but wanting to give her peace. Mom passed peacefully 3 days later, Zachary, Dad, and I at her bedside. I called Stephanie immediately. It was the first direct communication we'd had in years. Mom's gone, I said when she answered. Her sharp intake of breath was the only sound for several seconds. I'll be there in an hour, she finally replied, her voice breaking. We met at our parents' house, hugging briefly and awkwardly before turning our attention to Dad and funeral arrangements. The real test would come at the funeral itself, where years of hurt and anger would collide with fresh grief and Mom's final wish. The morning of Mom's funeral dawned gray and drizzly, fitting the somber occasion. I stood before the mirror in my childhood bedroom, adjusting my black dress and wondering how I would survive the day. Zachary appeared behind me, handsome in his dark suit, placing his hands gently on my shoulders. I'm right beside you today, he said, meeting my eyes in the reflection. Whatever happens. Downstairs, Dad sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his untouched coffee. The past week had hollowed him out, his tall frame suddenly stooped with grief. At 72, he seemed to have aged a decade since Mom's diagnosis. Ready, Dad? I asked softly, touching his shoulder. He nodded, rising slowly. Eleanor always said funerals aren't for the dead, they're for the living. Never understood that until now. The funeral home was already filling with extended family and friends when we arrived. I stayed close to Dad, greeting people with mechanical smiles, accepting condolences from faces I barely recognized. Cousins from California, Mom's college roommate, neighbors from throughout my parents' 40 years in their home. You look just like Eleanor at your age, my great-aunt Patricia said, patting my cheek. She would be proud of the woman you've become. How have you been, dear? Asked Mom's friend Judith. Eleanor mentioned you moved away. Chicago, was it? Yes, almost 5 years now, I replied, not adding that my sister's betrayal had prompted the move. As I guided Dad to his seat in the front row, Zachary at his other side, a murmur rippled through the gathering. I turned to see Stephanie and Nathan entering, their appearance causing heads to turn and whispers to spread. Stephanie wore an expensive black dress that highlighted her slender figure, diamond earrings catching the light. Nathan looked uncomfortable in his perfectly tailored suit, his arm around my sister's waist in a show of support. Her left hand rested prominently on her purse, the massive diamond engagement ring and wedding band impossible to miss. Dad stiffened beside me. Thomas, breathe, I whispered, concerned about his heart. They made their way forward, stopping to speak with various attendees. I kept my eyes front, focusing on the large photo of Mom displayed beside her closed casket, her warm smile easing some of my anxiety. Eventually, they reached the front. Stephanie embraced Dad, who returned the hug stiffly. Nathan shook his hand, receiving only a curt nod in response. Rebecca, Stephanie said, turning to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It's been a long time. Yes, I replied simply, not trusting myself with more words. Nathan nodded awkwardly. Sorry for your loss. Zachary had stepped away to speak with the funeral director, leaving me momentarily alone with them. Stephanie seized the opportunity. I need to speak with you privately, she said, gesturing toward a side room. Against my better judgment, I followed her, wanting to avoid a scene at Mom's funeral. The small room contained only a few chairs and a box of tissues, clearly designated for mourners needing private moments. Stephanie closed the door behind us. Up close, I noticed fine lines around her eyes that her expensive makeup couldn't quite conceal. You look thin, she remarked, her gaze assessing me critically. Grief does that, I replied flatly. She fiddled with her ring, twisting it around her finger. Nathan and I bought a summer house on Cape Cod last month. 8 bedrooms, private beach access. I remained silent, wondering why she felt compelled to share this information. We're considering starting a family soon, she continued. Nathan's company just acquired 2 startups, and we're renovating the 3rd floor for a nursery. Congratulations, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Is there something specific you wanted to discuss about the funeral arrangements? Her smile turned sharp, malicious. I just thought you might want to know how well we're doing. Poor you, still alone at 38. I got the man, the money, and the mansion. The familiar pain flared briefly, a phantom limb ache. Then it subsided. 6 years ago, her words would have devastated me. Today, they just seemed pathetic and desperate. I smiled, a genuine, quiet smile. Have you met my husband yet? Her expression faltered. Husband? Zachary. I called, opening the door to find him waiting nearby. Come meet my sister. As Zachary entered the room, Nathan appeared behind him, clearly having been watching our interaction. When the men made eye contact, Nathan's face drained of color. Foster, he said, his confident demeanor cracking. Reynolds. Zachary's tone remained professional but cool. It's been what, 7 years? Not since Macintosh acquired Initech instead of your client CompuServe, right? Nathan swallowed visibly. You 2 are married? 2 wonderful years now, I confirmed, slipping my hand into Zachary's. Zachary Foster. Stephanie repeated slowly, disbelief creeping into her voice. As in Foster Investments? The same, Zachary replied. Rebecca and I met at a tech conference in San Francisco. Nathan attempted to recover his composure. Foster, we should catch up sometime. I've been meaning to reach out about potential collaborations. My schedule's quite full, Zachary replied pleasantly but firmly. But you can contact my office if you'd like. The funeral director appeared, informing us the service was about to begin. As we returned to the main room, whispers followed us, the connection between Zachary and Nathan clearly known in business circles. We had just taken our seats when Dad clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. Dad! I cried as Zachary immediately called for help. We moved Dad to a private room. The funeral was temporarily delayed. A doctor among the attendees examined him, determining it was likely stress and not another heart attack. Stephanie followed us, genuine concern etched on her face. Is he okay? Should we call an ambulance? Her voice shook slightly. The doctor says he's stable, I replied, surprised by her sincerity, just overwhelmed. For 20 minutes, we sat together in awkward silence, united only by concern for our father. When he insisted on proceeding with the service, we returned to the main room, the brief crisis creating an unexpected truce. The funeral itself was beautiful and heartbreaking. I delivered a eulogy highlighting Mom's kindness, strength, and unwavering love for her family. When Stephanie rose to speak after me, she faltered after only a few sentences, tears overwhelming her. Without thinking, I moved to her side, placing a supportive hand on her back. It's okay, I whispered. Take your time. She gathered herself, completing her tribute to our mother with stories from our childhood that brought both tears and gentle laughter from the attendees. At the cemetery, rain fell softly as we laid Mom to rest. I noticed Nathan standing apart from the main group, checking his watch repeatedly. Stephanie remained by Dad's side, her earlier bravado replaced by genuine grief. The reception at my parents' house was crowded with well-wishers bringing casseroles and sharing memories. Nathan drank heavily, his discomfort evident as several business associates engaged Zachary in animated conversation. I overheard fragments about Nathan's company struggling with recent acquisitions and wondered if Stephanie's boasting had been covering financial troubles. Throughout the day, I maintained the dignity Mom would have expected, focusing on supporting Dad and honoring her memory rather than dwelling on old wounds. As guests began departing, I caught Stephanie watching me from across the room, her expression unreadable but somehow softer than before. The day after the funeral, Zachary needed to return to Chicago for an important board meeting. "Are you sure you'll be okay if I go?" he asked, packing his overnight bag. "I can reschedule." "Dad needs help sorting through Mom's things," I explained. "I should stay a few more days. I'll be fine." After seeing Zachary off at the airport, I returned to my parents' house to find Dad sitting in Mom's garden, a photo album open on his lap. "She labeled everything," he said, showing me Mom's neat handwriting beneath each photo. Said, "Someday we'd appreciate knowing who is who." That afternoon, I began the painful task of sorting through Mom's closet. Each dress held memories. The blue one from my college graduation, the floral print she wore to Sunday brunches, the elegant gray she'd chosen for my engagement party. I found myself talking to her as I worked, telling her about my life in Chicago, my work, my happiness with Zachary. In her bedside drawer, I discovered a journal bound in soft leather. Inside, Mom had written periodic entries over the past decade. Many mentioned her daughters, her hopes for our reconciliation, her sadness at the rift between us. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks before her death, read, "My greatest regret is leaving with my girls still estranged. Eleanor always fixed things, but I couldn't fix this. I pray they find their way back to each other somehow." The doorbell rang as I wiped away tears. Through the front window, I saw Stephanie standing alone on the porch. No sign of Nathan's car in the driveway. Dad had gone to his brother's house for dinner, leaving me to face my sister alone. I opened the door, uncertain what to expect. "Hi," she said simply. "Can I come in?" In the kitchen, I made coffee while Stephanie sat silently at the table. She looked different without Nathan beside her, smaller somehow, less artificially composed. "Where's Nathan?" I finally asked, placing a mug before her. "At home? He doesn't know I'm here." She wrapped her hands around the mug, but didn't drink. I told him I needed space after the funeral. The silence stretched between us. Years of unspoken words, creating an almost physical barrier. "I'm sorry about yesterday," she finally said. "What I said in that room at the funeral home, it was cruel and completely inappropriate." I nodded, acknowledging her apology without immediately accepting it. "I saw Mom's journal," she continued. "Dad showed it to me last night. Her last wish was for us to reconcile." "I found it too," I replied. "But reconciliation requires more than just proximity, Stephanie. It needs honesty." She looked up, tears filling her eyes. "You want honesty? Here's honesty. I'm miserable, Rebecca. Have been almost since the beginning." The dam broke then, words pouring out between sobs. Nathan had changed shortly after their wedding, becoming controlling and critical. His business had been struggling for years, each new acquisition an attempt to save a sinking ship. The houses, the cars, the vacations were all leveraged on mounting debt. Their marriage was a carefully constructed facade maintained for business connections and social standing. "He monitors my spending, checks my phone, questions my every movement," she admitted. "The Nathan you knew doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did." "Why stay?" I asked. "Shame," she answered immediately. "How could I admit what I'd done to you? Destroyed our family for something that turned out to be a mirage? And then there's the prenup. I leave with nothing." I pushed Mom's journal across the table. "Read the rest of her entries." As Stephanie read, fresh tears flowed. She looked up eventually, her face raw with emotion. She knew. She saw through everything. "Mom always did," I agreed. I've hated myself for years, Stephanie whispered. Every time Mom mentioned you, every accomplishment of yours she proudly shared, I felt the weight of what I'd done. I'm planning to leave him, Rebecca. I've been secretly consulting a lawyer.
My feelings were complicated.
Vindication mixed with unexpected compassion. The sister who had caused me such pain was suffering consequences I wouldn't have wished on anyone. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know the truth before I blow up my life again. We spent the next hours looking through Mom's belongings together, sharing memories both painful and precious. Stephanie recalled Mom teaching us to bake cookies, how she never mixed the separate batches because I liked chocolate chip and Stephanie preferred sugar cookies. Remember how she used to leave notes in our lunch boxes? Stephanie asked, smiling through tears. Different messages every day. I nodded. She never repeated one. We weren't instantly healed, the wounds too deep for immediate closure. But as evening fell, something had shifted between us. Mom's love creating a fragile bridge across years of hurt. What will you do? I asked, as Stephanie prepared to leave. File for divorce, when my lawyer says the timing is right. Rent a small apartment. Start over. She paused at the door. What about you? Will you go back to Chicago? Yes, my life is there now. With Zachary. You seem happy, she said. A statement rather than a question. I am truly happy. I'm glad one of us should be. We hugged briefly, awkwardly, before she left. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. Back in Chicago, I settled into life with Zachary, our brownstone, and my rewarding career. 6 months after Mom's funeral, after years of trying, I discovered I was pregnant. The joy was tempered with sadness that Mom wouldn't meet her grandchild, but I felt her presence in quiet moments. Stephanie and I maintained cautious contact through occasional phone calls. She had filed for divorce and moved into a modest apartment, finding work at a small marketing firm. The gossip and judgment she faced in Boston social circles was difficult, but she seemed determined to rebuild authentically. The path that led me here was never one I would have chosen. Losing Nathan had seemed like the end of my world, but it had actually been the beginning of a far better one. With Zachary, I found not just love, but partnership, respect, and unwavering support. His success never overshadowed mine, but complemented it. Each of us growing stronger together. Mom had been right about forgiveness being for ourselves rather than others. The weight of anger and resentment had lifted gradually, allowing me to see my past with clarity and my future with hope. The scars remained, but they no longer defined me. As I sat in our nursery, Zachary painting the walls a soft green, I thought about the lessons I would someday share with our child. How loss can lead to finding. How endings create space for beginnings. How the hardest moments often direct us toward our truest path. My life had become richer and more authentic than I could have imagined during those dark days 6 years ago. Not despite the betrayal, but because of how it forced me to rebuild with greater wisdom and intention. Have you ever experienced a painful loss that eventually led you to something truly better? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Tell me what you think. I really want to know. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and unexpected blessings. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most difficult chapters lead to the most beautiful endings.